Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody. Before we get into the issue, I just wanted to let you guys know that this is the free version of the podcast. And all that means is that this is far behind where I'm at in the Patreon version. So if you're liking this and you need more John Constantine, you can't get enough, be sure to go over to patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, and sign up for the Hellblazer tier, which gives you access to the entire Hellblazer library that I've done so far, and a new Hellblazer podcast every week. And you'll also get the exclusives from our main Planes, Trains, and Comic Books podcast. So if any of that interests you, definitely check out our Patreon at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word. And with that, let's get into the issue. Today we are reading Hellblazer number 17. And just a little catch up, we've been following John as he's been on the run from the police for some murders that he did not commit. So he has found refuge with some travelers that are traveling the countryside. They're kind of a cool counterculture bunch, a little bit like hippies. They all travel around in caravans together and get high, meet up, do magic, stuff like that, protect the earth. And one of those travelers is a girl named Mercury. And she has been kidnapped by a corporation because she has some kind of psychic or mental powers. And the reason they kidnapped her is because this corporation is using ley lines, which are kind of power centers from the earth. They are kind of like topographical lines that go around in certain places. And wherever you're at, they kind of channel the earth's magical energy. It's kind of like vortexes in New Age kind of beliefs. And it hasn't been revealed yet why this company is interested in ley lines, other than we know they're bad because they're trying to like fence off the stones. And the leader of the travelers named Eddie, he said he traveled to one of the sites that they had gone to already that was fenced off. And he had said like basically the spot was dead. There was only like dark energy there now, so it had been like tapped completely of its energy. So after the corporation kidnapped the girl Mercury, Constantine got very angry because this is his group of new friends, and basically this company doesn't know who they've been messing with. They don't know that Constantine is Constantine, that he is a very powerful magician who messes with heaven and hell and always comes out ahead at the end. So he is now on a mission. He cut his hair, he got black Matrix clothes. He's got a black trench coat and sunglasses, and he is heading to London to take them head on and also find Mercury. So that is where we left off. But first things first, we got the cover here of issue 17. It is a very interesting cover that is very striking and stands out because it's got really, really vivid purple on the cover. And the purple is part of an iris. So it actually is like a big eyeball, I guess, that is looking. And inside the iris is a train that John Constantine is riding on. You see the windows. It's a very cool design, and it looks obviously like someone is watching the train, but like from a very all-encompassing perspective. And we see on the first page that this is Fear Machine Part 4. That is the name of this arc. But this specific issue is called Fellow Travelers, and it is written by Jamie Delano, and the art is by a guest artist named Mike Hoffman. So at the end of the last issue, we saw Constantine buy a train ticket to go to London, and someone was following him. So we start off here on the train, and Constantine is stuck sitting with an old lady in one of the riding compartments, and he lights up a cigarette because, you know, he loves the smoke, and we see the old lady pointing at the no smoking sign, and she gets all mad, and she was knitting something, so she threatens him with her knitting needles and says, "Young man, I don't want to breathe your poisonous fumes all the way to London." So Constantine leaves because he's like, I don't want to deal with this old lady, and she like pokes him with her knitting needles. And we also see as he's leaving, there is someone with sunglasses who is kind of following him, or at least keeping an eye on Constantine. And then we cut to a man named Mr. Webster, who is the head of Geotronic Security, which is the name of the company that's been doing all the weird stuff with the ley lines. And he is watching out the window as the train goes by, and he's talking to someone, and he says, "I see. Yes, I'll attend to it immediately." So it seems like he's getting orders from someone, but we don't know who that is yet. And then we cut to Mercury, who is still in the room that Geotronics has kept her in and drugged up since they kidnapped her. And then we get some narration that's pretty creepy. It's obvious someone's watching her saying, "So sweet and peacefully sleeping, but so powerful, lovely, a fantastic child, a dream." And we see that man is the man that she calls Fungus Face, but we find out his real name is actually Dr. Fulton. So this was the man that she had wrestled with her mind in the previous issue at the stone site that Geotronics was trying to corrupt. And I believe that is the first time they encountered each other, which caused him to be aware of her presence and find out that she was a psychic and super powerful. And he got the idea that, hey, we could kidnap her and use her for our program. So while Mr. Fulton is creepily watching Mercury sleep, Mr. Webster, the head of security, comes down and tells Dr. Fulton that he needs the most able psychic tracker that they have. And Fulton immediately volunteers Mercury, but Webster's like, wait, no, she's way too young. We need someone else who's more experienced. So they settle on a man named Corporal Morgan, who I guess has been part of this experiment, and he's probably in the military and has been assigned to this project. And we have seen Corporal Morgan's face before. In the last issue, Mercury was having bad dreams about a man who's stabbing himself in the eyes with scissors, and the man in her dream definitely resembles Corporal Morgan. So Dr. Fulton introduces Corporal Morgan to Mr. Webster and says, oh, this is head of security. He's got a job for you. And what we find out is, if you remember in the last issue when Constantine was tripping, he went to one of the stone sites and saw a man he thought was a dream, actually, and it looked like the man was smashing his face into one of the stones, and he also had a bunch of equipment with him that was tied to the stones and his head at the same time. So Constantine, being super high on drugs, thought that that was all a vision, even though there was still blood on the stone afterwards, but there was no body. So Mr. Webster fills us in and says, the Environmental Impact Squad, who followed up your last test, discovered a body concealed near the Wykes Valley Stone Circle. Identification was difficult, but we now know that the deceased was a member of the Soviet espionage team. So it seems like the Soviets are trying to get information on this ley line magic and whatever this corporation is doing with it. And Webster continues, electronic monitoring equipment found with the body suggests that security was compromised. It is imperative that we locate and contain the other agent before he can report to his embassy. Further intelligence indicates this man, Sergei Antonon, of the Leningrad Institute of Paranormal Research, recently seconded to the London embassy to be the most likely suspect. So what they're saying is that this guy named Sergei Antonon was the partner of the guy who smashed his skull on the stones, and they need to find him before he can get the information that he's collected back to the Soviet government. So in order to find him, they are going to use Corporal Morgan's psychic abilities, but they have to increase them in order for him to get a lock onto Anton's position. So what they do is they give him a shot that they call a booster, and as it kicks in, he begins to concentrate very hard. He begins rubbing his temples with his fingers, and he begins to say, it's hard to see. It's all mixed up. He's moving. And then Webster yells at him, harder, try harder. How is he moving? Is he walking, running, flying? And as they're talking, we see little panel flashes of John Constantine walking around in the main cab after he got kicked out by the old lady. And then we see he's still being tailed by the same person that was following him at the train station and in the rest of the train. And then Corporal Morgan's eyes snap open and he says, no, it's a train. The bugger's on a train. Then he focuses more and says, it's the 1044 from Bristol to London Paddington. So now Webster's got all the information he needs to intercept this train and capture the Soviet agent Sergei Antonon. So now that they know he's on a train, Webster and Fulton begin to plan. And Fulton realizes they have a time issue because they don't want to get him in the middle of London. They want to get him while he's still traveling and in the countryside. But that train is moving fast and it's pretty close to London. So they're like, we have a time crunch and we want to do this discreetly, so we have to either intercept or delay. So while Mr. Webster is looking at the train maps of the railways and trying to figure out the best spot to delay the train or intercept it, Dr. Fulton's like, wait a second, I have an idea. Superimpose the map of the ley lines over the train track map. And when they do that, they find out that there is, in fact, a 10-mile area where the track actually overlaps the ley lines that they've been studying. So Mr. Webster asks, can we hit the Russian with a charge from the machine? And Fulton says, yeah, but we're not just going to hit him, we're going to hit the whole train. And Mr. Webster doesn't really care about that. He says, well, that's unfortunate, but unavoidable. Get everything prepared. So this is the first time we're hearing about a machine that they're going to be using with the ley line. So if you could put two and two together, that probably is what the fear machine is. hence the name of this story arc. So then we cut back into the train where Constantine is just trying to get a cup of coffee, but of course he got kicked out of that old lady's room, so now he's just sitting with the general population in the buffet car, and he's stuck talking to some guy who's talking about riding every train that's available or something. It's a weird thing. He's saying he's gonna be photographed for the local papers, and Constantine's like, excuse me, I gotta go, because he's like, this guy's so fucking boring. And the guy's like, aren't you interested in train spotting? And Constantine's like, in a word, no. And then we cut to the actual fear machine, which is pretty cool looking. It's very ominous. Basically, they've created a fake Stonehenge. So they have all these big square stones in a circle with the center kind of stone arc in the middle. And then there's all these geometric line patterns that are going to and from the different sides of the circle. And there's a control room that's looking over this whole room, and that's where Dr. Fulton and Mr. Webster are monitoring. So then we see Corporal Morgan walk into the center of this circle underneath the arc, and he puts his arms up and he stands in like an open splayed power stance. And we see these like yellow ghostly lines start to appear around him and around the stones in the circle. And then Mr. Webster says over the intercom, Corporal Morgan, I will need immediate confirmation of success. When the charge is delivered to the target, you will remain with it and report the results. Is that understood, Corporal? And Morgan can barely answer, but he says, yes, sir. And you can see the intensity in his eyes and the concentration that he has in order to not break whatever's going on here. But as he concentrates further, we cut back to the train and we follow Constantine, who went back to the cars and is trying to find another one to sit in that doesn't have the angry old lady. But each time he goes, there's always someone else there or that's already full. So one of them's got a bunch of kids freaking out with a teacher and they're on some kind of class trip, and we see all the kids are going crazy, and one of them's reading Lord of the Flies, which is pretty funny. And then the other one, there's some creepy dude who's reading a porno mag while he talks to two young ladies who are sitting across from him, and one of them saying, I would for 50 quid, wouldn't you? So it seems like this man is propositioning them or talking to them about sex and being very inappropriate with two people he doesn't know and are just traveling in the same train car with him. So Constantine's just like, I need to go somewhere quiet. I'm just going to go in here and have a smoke. So he goes into the men's restroom, and the entire time he has been noticing that there is a guy following him. So as he goes into the restroom, he kind of turns around and watches the door, and the door opens up. And right as he's about to confront the man who's been following him, we see the magical power from the fear machine hit the train and begin to attack. And when I say attack, I literally mean it like goes inside of it, and it kind of looks like a gas bomb exploded outside of the train and inside of the train. And these little lines of power are going through every car, and basically they're driving everybody mad with fear. And even Constantine, who, because he's in the bathroom, all of a sudden he hears a noise coming from the toilet, and he looks over and he sees a bunch of raw sewage bubbling up out of the toilet and forming into the shape of a person. Very much like Dogma with the shit demon monster. All of this is about 6 years before that. So Constantine was caught unawares by this whole magical fear machine thing. And so he's just as scared as everybody else. He's kind of freaking out and being like, well, I don't understand. Why am I freaking out so much? I'm bloody Constantine. I should be used to fighting demons and shit monsters and everything. Nothing should scare me. But he is under the spell or being affected by the fear machine just like everybody else in the train. So he's freaking out. He's like, it's hell. Hell's coming for me. And as Constantine runs back through the passenger car, he sees everybody else is freaking out too. People are yelling, he wants to suck my eyes. My daughter hates me. Baby's on fire. The dog with no face. Just basically everybody's fears are coming out. Whatever they were scared of, their worst fears are attacking them. And Constantine is so freaked out, he basically almost tries to jump out of the train, but he's like, no, I can't yet. And of course, Constantine is under the impression that this attack is for him. He's assuming it's for him, but it's actually for the Russian agent Sergei Antonon, who he doesn't know anything about. So while all this commotion is going on, Mr. Webster is asking Morgan for an update. He says, what's happening, Morgan? And Morgan's like, psychic shock, sir. They took a full hit. Now they're soaking it up. And then we cut back to Constantine, who is still running through the train. And the further he goes, the more horrific the scenes become. Basically, people are now seeing like apparitions made out of this fear power from Morgan and the machine. and people are beginning to fight and murder each other, and there's just a lot of chaos going on in the train. And Constantine's saying to himself, get a grip, get a grip, get a grip, get a grip. Come on, man. You're supposed to be able to handle this shit. You could do better than this. And he finds a train car that looks empty, so he goes inside and he's just trying to get a moment to calm down and take a time out to get his bearings straight. And it just so happens that this is the original car he was in with the old lady. And the old lady goes up to him and says, young man, please pull yourself together. I need your assistance. I've managed to stop the dreadful screaming, but I couldn't get the needles out. And then Constantine looks up as she puts her hand on his shoulder, and he is freaked the fuck out because she has jammed the knitting needles into her ears. And he just runs away from her because he's horrified. And he starts thinking to himself, he's like, think, man, think. What's causing this insanity? Mass psychosis? Drugs in the tea? It's not hell. Too clumsy for hell. Whatever it is, it's killing me, suffocating me with its dense, breathless dread. I need a purpose, a focus, something to pull me out of this madness. I need to find the guy who was following me. He must be doing it. And then we cut back to Mr. Webster, who's talking again to Corporal Morgan, and he says, where's the Russian, Morgan? And Morgan's like, don't know, sir. I don't know. It's terrible. He must be hiding from the horror. So then we cut back to John, and he is walking back through the cars he saw before. So at first he sees the man who was being inappropriate and reading pornography in front of the young two women. And as John looks in, he sees that that man is now dead, and there's only one girl left in the car, and she's saying, sorry, I had to. I was frightened. He was too. She told him not to worry, but he pushed her out the window anyway. So apparently he murdered her friend, and she murdered him because she was scared, and everybody was scared. And then the next compartment he sees is the one with the teacher and the kids, and the teacher has hung himself, and we can only see one of the kids now, but one of them has shoved their hand in their mouth. It looked like they tried to eat their hand. And in the next car, he just barely looks in, and he sees the word help written in blood. So he gets out of there as fast as he can, and he's making his way back to the toilet where that guy that was following him was. So he gets there and he's like, I got you, you bastard, because the dude's still in there. He's, of course, covered with sewage and feces and whatever, because that poop demon came out after Constantine. And John was expecting a fight or this guy to attack him, but the guy's actually scared of Constantine. He says, you stay away from me, you demon. And he's able to push past John as he runs out of the restroom to the other areas of the train. And there's a panel on this page that kind of cuts back to Morgan, who's looking more and more stressed out. He's sweating and he's concentrating, and we see Mr. Webster say, flush him out, Morgan, find him. And then we see Constantine kind of reach his arm out to try to grab the man as he runs past Constantine, and he says, how can I hold him? He started it again. So Corporal Morgan has finally targeted the Soviet agent Sergei Antonon, and that is the man who was following Constantine. So John catches up to him in one of the other cars, and his internal narration says, he's doing this, and I'm going to get him for it. We're two of a kind. We know this insane world. It's where we play our games. We're different from all these poor, witless bastards. We can take it. They shouldn't be involved. And he begins laughing like maniacally as he's finally able to catch Sergei and grab his arm. Constantine thinks to himself, I'm holding him. He's not strong enough to take me this time. And then he says to the man, give it up, pal. Nowhere to go now. And the man responds in a way that Constantine wasn't expecting. He says, stop it. Call it off. Please call it off. And Constantine's like, what? And Sergei is pulling out a gun as he says this, like out of his pocket. And the man who was talking to John about the trains and possibly getting in the newspaper for writing all the trains or whatever, he's under the table next to them, and he runs out because his greatest fear is not being able to ride all the trains and get in the newspaper, I guess. So he sees this going on, and he's like, no, you can't do this. Don't you know the train's going too fast for the tunnel curve? Don't you even care that I haven't ridden all the trains yet? And as he says this, he lunges at Sergei, who has the gun in his hand. And I guess Sergei was seeing something else because he yells, keep back, you beast of hell. And then he shoots at the man and hits him. And that's where John realizes, wait a second, whatever magic's going on is going for him, not for me. And then possibly my favorite line in the whole comic happens as the train man falls over into Constantine's arms. And as he's falling, he says, I won't be in the paper now. But while he's holding on to Constantine, he actually gives him some good advice. He says, do something. The train will crash if you don't pull the emergency cord. And John's like, well, why didn't I think of that? So John pulls the emergency stop cord and the train comes to a halt, but it also partially derails because I guess it was going so fast. And then John narrates, body slammed, breathless, winded, heart shaken loose, thrown into space, weightless, free, and then snapped back, smashed by the law of gravity. And the noise, the shrieking, screaming, clattering cacophony of a breaking world goes on forever, beyond the double glazing of my mind slapped numb, evolving slowly into a blackly pregnant beast of stillness, which one by one gives a low moaning birth to the tickings and groanings of tortured steel. But strangely, there is no more fear. And we see a panel of Corporal Morgan, and he's concentrating extremely hard. His forehead is wrinkled with concentration, and his eyes are straining as sweat pours down his brow. And Mr. Webster says, what can you see, Morgan? Morgan, answer me! And Morgan says, no more, sir. Can't see nothing now. I had to come away. And then we get back to John, who is alive, and he's pulling himself out of the wreckage. And as he looks around, he sees that the train spotter who got shot is dead. And then he also sees that Sergei Antonon is there as well, but he is not dead. He's breathing. He's just knocked out. And as John thinks about it, he's like, who is he? I'm sure those words he spoke were Russian. He sounded just like that guy who I thought I saw smash his brains out on the stones. Who's after who? He thought it was me sending something after him. If it was after him all along, then that means a third party must have sent it. And anyone who'd launched something like this against a trainload of people has got to be a bad guy. And as he's thinking this, he sees police start to show up, but then he realizes these aren't police. These are like the fake police that came to trash the caravan earlier. These are actually members of the security team for the corporation, and they're trying to find the body of Sergei Antonon. And once John realizes this, he pulls Sergei into a more concealed area behind some bushes, and then he notices, hey, there's a gun in Sergei's pocket, and he could almost shoot one of the guys. He's thinking about it, but he decides not to. So he picks Sergei's body up, and he sneaks off with him to hide from the fake police. Then we cut to the Fear Machine control room, where Dr. Fullerton is saying, Beale's men are on site now, Mr. Webster. They haven't found him yet. How will we ever justify the loss of life? And Mr. Webster responds, don't be stupid, Fulton. There's no witnesses. But Morgan can hear them, and he says, it weren't right, sir. You shouldn't have made me do it, sir. You shouldn't have made me watch. And his eyes are all bloodshot. They do like a close-up of his eyeballs as they look up at the control room. And he continues, all the people, all the terrible things that happen to people. I was right there with them, doing it to them. I was never so close before. Not in the Falklands, nor in Ireland. I was never inside them when they died. And Corporal Morgan is basically traumatized. He's having immediate PTSD from this. And then as he goes back into his room, we cut to Mercury, who's been asleep this whole time. And in her mind, she's thinking while she's still asleep, he's sobbing again. And Mercury snaps awake, and it says, Mercury knows what's going to happen. And we see Morgan walk into his room, and he grabs a pair of scissors and stares at himself in a mirror, and he proceeds to stab himself in the eyes. And the narration says over Mercury trying to hide her face in a pillow, she tries to shut it out, but it happens anyway, just like it always does. And that is the end of this issue. If you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planestrains and comic books, all one word, @gmail.com, and we will see you on the next one.